photography or photography at all for that matter. And also just to let you know, there are 2 intermissions tonight, and they're only 10 minutes each. And during these intermissions, we're going to have kissograms in the back that are $1 each for a family member or a friend that you have that's involved in the show to say hi, or your favorite actor. So thank you so much, guys. Have a good night.
Mr. Earnest Worthy!
Oh! And how are you, dear Earnest? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What else should bring on anyway? Meeting as usual, I see, Algy.
Well, I believe it is customary in good society to take some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
In the country.
And what on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself, and when one is in the country, one amuses other people. It is excessive boring.
And who are the people you amuse?
Oh, neighbors, neighbors.
Got nice neighbors in your pawn shop side?
Oh, you're one of them.
Ah, how immensely you must amuse them. By the way, Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Shropshire? Yes, of course it is. Tell me, why are these cups? Why cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance for one so young? It's going to tea.
Really Aunt Augusta and Gwendolyn.
How delightful.
Yes, that is all very well, but I'm afraid Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
Oh, my dear boy, and the way you approach with Gwendolyn is perfectly disgraceful. It is almost as bad as the way Gwendolyn first with you.
I'm in love with Gwendolyn. I've come to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you said you were coming for pleasure. I know that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
Well, there's nothing romantic about a definite proposal. It is very romantic to be in love, but there's nothing romantic at all about a definite proposal. I want to be accepted. But one usually is, I believe, and then the whole thing is all over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. If ever I get married, I'll certainly try to forget that.
I have no doubt about that, dear Alfie. The divorce book is specially invented for those whose memories are so curiously constituted.
There's no use speculating on that subject. Divorces are made in heaven. Now, please don't touch your cucumber sandwiches, Jack. This was made specifically for Aunt Augusta.
You've been eating them all the time.
That's quite a different matter. Here's my aunt. Here, have some bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn is devoted to bread and butter.
And a very good bread and butter it is too.
Well, dear boy, you need not eat as if you're going to eat at all. It behaves as if you were married to her already. And you are not married to her already, and I don't believe you ever will be.
Why on earth do you say that?
Well, in the first place, girls never marry men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
Oh, that's nonsense.
It isn't. It accounts for the extraordinary number of bachelors one sees all over the place. And in the second place, I give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear boy, Gwendolyn is my first cousin. And before I allow you to marry Gwendolyn, you'll first have to prepare for the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What do you mean, Alfie? What do you mean by Cecily? I don't know anyone with the name Cecily.
Remember that cigarette case Miss Gwendolyn put in the dining room the last time you died here?
Yes. You mean to tell me you had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness you would let me know. I was writing very frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. I was very nearly offered a large reward.
Oh! I wish you would offer one. I happen to be usually hard up.
There's no good offering a reward now that things come.
Well, that's rather mean of you, Ernest, I must say. Oh, however, that really makes no matter. And now that I look at the inscription inside, I find that the thing isn't yours after all.
Of course it's mine. You've seen me with it 100 times, and you have no right whatsoever to read what is written inside. It's very ungentlemanly that you read a private cigarette case.
It's absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't. And more than half of modern culture depends on what one should read.
Well aware of that fact, I don't propose to discuss modern culture. This is the sort of thing one talks of in private. Simply want my cigarette case.
This is not your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present from someone by the name of Cecily. Oh, and you said you didn't know anybody by that name?
Well, you must know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Oh, your aunt?
Yes, charming old lady lives in Tunbridge Wells. Now just give it back to me, Algy.
Then why does your aunt, who lives in Tunbridge Wells, call herself Little Cecily? From Little Cecily with her fondest love.
My dear girl, is there in that? Some aunts are tall, and some aunts are not tall. That is a matter surely to be decided by the aunt herself. You seem to think that every aunt should be exactly as your aunt, and that, my dear boy, is absurd. Now, give me my cigarette. Give it back!
Yes, but why does your aunt call you her uncle? From Little Cecily with her fondest love to her dear Uncle Jack? Oh, there's no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt. But why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle? I can't quite make out. Besides, her name isn't Jack at all. It's Ernest.
It isn't Earnest, it's Jack.
But you have introduced yourself to me as Ernest. I have introduced you to everyone else as Ernest. You look as if your name was Ernest. You are the most perfectly earnest-looking person I have ever met in my life. It's absurd you're saying your name isn't Ernest. It's on your card. Here's one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany. Well, I'll keep this as proof that your name is Ernest, in case you ever attempt to deny it to me, or to Gwendolyn, or to anyone else.
Well, my name is Earnest in the town, and Jack in the country, and the cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but that does not account for your small Aunt Cecily, who lives in Tunbridge Wells, calls her own nephew her uncle. Come, dear boy, you'd much better have the whole thing out at once. I may mention that I've always suspected you of being a secret
mean by Bunburyist?
Well, I'll reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you are kind enough to relate to me why you were earnest in town and gentle in the country.
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now, produce your explanation. Oh, and pray make it improbable.
Oh, dear fellow, there's nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it's perfectly ordinary. Oh, Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me in his will guardian to his grandmother, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as uncle from motives of respect that you could not possibly appreciate, lives at my place in the country, under the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prison.
And where is that place in the country, by the way?
That is nothing to you, dear boy. You are not going to be invited. I maintain quite candidly that the place is not in Shropshire.
I suspected that, my dear fellow. I have Bunbury all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. What you really are is a... Why does your... Why are you earnest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, I doubt you can possibly understand my motives. You're hardly serious enough. One is placed in the position of guardian. One has to adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. It's one's duty to do so. Now, this is a high moral tone can hardly conduce well to one's health or one's happiness. In order to get up to town, I have always pretended to have a younger brother by the name of Earnest, who lives in the Albany, and gets in the most dreadful scrapes. That, my dear boy, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be very tedious if it were either. Oh, in modern literature, a complete impossibility.
That wouldn't be at all a bad thing.
Literary criticism is not your forte, my dear fellow, don't try it. You ought to think less of the folks who have been to university. You do it so well in the daily papers. What you really are is a Bunburyist. Well, it's quite right suspecting you're a Bunburyist. You're the most advanced Bunburyist I know.
What on earth do you mean by Bunburyist?
Well, you have invented a perfectly useful younger brother named Earnest in order that you be able to go into town whenever you want to. I have invented a perfectly useful permanent invalid named Bunbury, so that I'm able to go into the country whenever I so choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. For instance, if it wasn't for poor Bunbury's extraordinarily poor health, I would be able to dine with you tonight at Phyllis's. For I've been really engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
No, you're absurdly careless about sending out invitations. Don't be uncareful. Nothing annoys someone so much as not receiving an invitation.
You would much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I have no intention of doing anything of the sort. The view of my dine there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, whenever I do dine there, I'm always treated as a member of the family instead of either no one at all or two. And in the third place, I know perfectly well who she will place me next to tonight. She will place me next to Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her own husband across the dinner table. That is not very pleasant. Indeed, it is not convenient. And that sort of thing is enormously increased. And the amount of women in London who flirt with their own husbands is perfectly scandalous. It looks so bad. It is something washing one's own clean linens in public. Besides, now that I know you to be a convert Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunbury. I want to tell you the rules.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolyn accepts me, then I'm going to kill my brother. In fact, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cecily is a little too much interested in him. It's rather a bore. So I'm going to get rid of Ernest. And I'd strongly advise you to do the same with your your invalid friend with the absurd name.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury. And if you ever get married, which seems to me to be extremely problematic, you'll be very happy to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time.
If I marry a charming girl like Gwendolyn, and she's the only girl in the government that I would marry, I certainly wouldn't want to know Bunbury.
Well, then you're my girl. You don't seem to realize, my dear boy, that you're married by 3 is company and 2 is none.
That is the theory the corrupt French drama has been propounding for the last 50 years.
Yes, and that the happy English drama has proved in half the time.
For heaven's sake, don't try to be cynical. It's perfectly easy to be cynical.
My dear boy, it's easy to be anything nowadays. There's such a lot of beastly competition about. That was the other guest guy. Only relatives or creditors ever ring that Wagnerian manner. Oh, now, if I get Aunt Augusta out of the way for 10 minutes, so that you might have an opportunity for proposing to Gwendolyn, might I down through tonight to Willis's?
I suppose so, if you want to.
Yes, but you must be serious about it. I hate when people are not serious about meals. It is so shallow.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax. Good afternoon, Algernon.
Have you ever heard
sorry if we're late out and on, but I was obliged to call on Lady Harbury. I hadn't been there since our poor husband's death. I'd never seen a woman so altered. She looked quite 20 years younger. Now I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Lord Augusta.
Where did you come sit here, Gwendolen?
Thank you, Mamma. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Good heavens! Nay! Why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
There were no cucumbers in the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers?
No, sir. Not even for ready money.
That will do, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I am greatly distressed, Lord Augusta, about there being no cucumbers on the market this morning, not even for ready money.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I have crumpets of Lady Harbury. It seems to me to be the entirely for pleasure.
Yes, I hear her hair has turned quite gold from green.
It certainly has changed its colour from what cause, of course, I cannot say. Oh, I've quite a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I'm going to send you down with Mary Farquhar. Oh, she's such a nice woman, so attentive to her husband. It is like to watch them.
Yes, well, I'm afraid I will have to give her the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all.
I would hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he's accustomed to that.
Well, it is a great bore, and I need hardly tell you what terrible disappointment to me. But the fact is that I have just had a telegram to tell me that my poor friend Salisbury is very ill again. They seem to think I should be with him.
It is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, poor Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, Algernon, I think it is high time that this Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he wants to live or to die. This shilly-shying with the question is absurd. Nor do I in any way approve of modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Kindness of any kind is hardly a thing to be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty of life. And I was telling that to your poor uncle, but he never seems to take much notice as far as any improvement in his ailment goes. I should be much obliged for you to ask Mr. Bunbury from me to be kind enough not to have a relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one wants something that encourages conversation, particularly at the end of the season, when everyone has said practically everything they have to say, which was probably not much.
Well, I'll speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta. If he is still conscious, and I think I can promise you he'll be all right by Saturday. The music, of course, is an entirely different matter. You see, if one plays good music, the people don't listen. If one plays bad music, the people don't talk. But I will be happy to go over the program I've run out with you, if you will kindly step into the next room for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. It is very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the program will be delightful. After a few explanations. French songs I cannot possibly allow. People always seem to think they are improper and look shocked, which is vulgar. Oh, wow! Which is worse! But German sounds a very respectable language, and indeed I believe is good. Gwendolen, you will accompany me.
Certainly, Mamma.
Charming day has been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever anybody talks to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that it means something else. And that makes me so nervous.
I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I'm never wrong.
And I would like to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I think it would be an admirable opportunity. Mamma has a way of coming back into a room suddenly that I often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I've admired you more than any girl that I've ever met since I met you.
Yes, I'm quite well aware of that fact. Now too much that public at any rate, you had been more demonstrative. For me, you've always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. The fact is constantly mentioned in more expensive monthly magazines. It has reached provincial pulpits, I'm told. But my ideal has always been to love someone with the name of Earnest. There's something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. From the moment Algernon first mentioned me that he had a friend called Earnest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really loved me, Gwendolyn.
Passionately.
Oh, darling, you have no idea how happy you made me.
My own Ernest!
Darling. You don't mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Earnest.
But your name is Ernest.
Yes, I know it is, but supposing it was something else. You mean to say that you couldn't love me then?
Ah, this is clearly a metaphysical speculation, and like most metaphysical speculations, has very little reference to the actual facts of real life as we know them.
Well, personally, darling, to speak quite candidly, I don't care much about the name Earnest. In fact, I don't think it suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has music of its own. Produces vibration.
Well, really, darling, I think that any other much nicer names, I think Jack, for instance, is a charming name.
Jack? No. There's very little music in Jack, if any at all, indeed. It doesn't thrill, it produces absolutely no vibration. I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, were more than usually plain. Besides, Jack's a notorious necessity for John, and I pity any woman who's married to a man called John. Probably never know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. The only really safe name is Earnest.
Gwendolyn, I must get christened at once. I mean, we must get married at once.
Married? Mr. Worthing!
But yes, Gwendolyn, you know that I love you, and you've led me to believe that you were not absolutely indifferent to me.
I adore you, but you haven't even proposed yet. Nothing at all has been said about marriage. The subject has not even been touched upon.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity.